This is Brother Charles O'Leary, better known to his schoolmates as Michael O'Leary, from Cosh Lowra in the parish of Clondrohid. We in Macroom, of course, would claim a little part of him now as we meet him in Macroom. Brother Charles, you're now in the missions in Borneo for how many years?
About 51 years this year.
And what type of work are you involved in there?
Well, I belong to the Salle order, an order of teaching brothers. So our main work, of course, would be in the teaching apostolate. We have schools in all the Southeast Asian countries, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, Sri Lanka, the Philippines.
Where exactly is your school at the moment?
Most of my missionary career has been in fact all of it has been on the island of Borneo. There were two British colonies, former British colonies, northwest of Borneo, the island of Borneo, which is the third largest island in the world. And we took over the schools there from the Mill Hill Missionary Society in the early 50s. So I am based in the city of Kota Kinabalu, which is now a city and the capital of Sabah, one of the states of the Federation of Malaysia. Former British colony, but federated now, part of what we call Malaysia. Also it's referred to as East Malaysia.
Had you difficulty with the language when you went out there first?
Well, of course, when we went out first, our schools, mission schools, were they used English as the medium of instruction. It was, after all, British colonies, and wherever the British went, they certainly, imparted the culture and the language to the local people, and that's what the local people wanted. So it has a long British connection. Even long before it was a colony, it was run by a chartered company. So it has a long British tradition, and naturally English would be the language of the more educated people. And it's still widely used. In fact, it is the second language of the country. Malay is now, of course, the national language. So we were immediately thrown into the teaching of English and preparing the students for the senior Cambridge examinations. So only when Malaysia became independent in the 60s the national language, of course, was introduced. So gradually, of course, most of us learned the native language. I can speak the native language myself, maybe not fluently, but good enough to carry me through. Yeah.
And that would be Malay.
Malay, yeah.
Yes.
It's also the same language as Indonesia.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, the Christian population of Sabah would be approximately.
It's a good, I would say, 30%.
Oh yes.
It's of all the states of Malaysia, Sabah, Sarawak have a strong Christian Catholic presence.
Yes.
Catholics, of course, far outnumber the other denominations,
Yes.
or Christian denominations.
Now, what are conditions now amongst the pupils that you taught over the 50 years? Were they the very poor or middle class?
It varied.
Yes.
It varied. In the towns there would be mainly Chinese, with a good percentage of the tribal people, native people we would call them. But of course, as you move into the interior, the interior towns, you would certainly, we were church schools were catering for the very poor, and the towns, of course, we did have quite a lot of rich, fairly well-to-do middle-class people,
Yes.
mainly Chinese.
Yes. The missionary activity would not have been your particular duty. You were teaching.
Yeah, well, our mission
flying
is
the
not,
flag,
we're not
sure.
preachers,
Yes.
we are teachers.
Yes.
And I think we are founded by St. John Baptist de La
Sure.
Salle, who is the patron of all teachers.
Yes.
And his vision, his mission, his aim, as is ours ever since, is to promote human and Christian education.
Yes.
So we would never confine ourselves to teaching of religion only.
Yes.
We would teach all subjects to
Yes.
all kinds.
Yes.
All are welcome in our schools, whether they are Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus. That has always been our tradition out there. And we feel that the church is not just confined to the four walls of church. The church is also wherever the community are, in the schools in particular. And it is through the schools that the church built up the local church.
Yes.
Wherever there was a parish, they started a school. That was the Missionary Society of Millhill did Trojan work in doing that. And I think it's a pity to disassociate the church from the schools.
Of course, of course. Now, St. John Baptist de La Salle, we always considered him the first vocational teacher, insofar as his education was more than book learning.
Correct.
And was that
Yeah.
the philosophy in your administration?
Always,
Yes.
always has been. St. La Salle really is the pioneer of modern education.
Yes.
And so, while the spiritual was not at all neglected, certainly, that common sense to
Yes.
prepare people, first of all, citizens of this world,
Yes.
and later citizens of the next. So they were in those very early days. He set up schools for the very poor, taught them how to read and write, taught them trades, practical things. And of course, because of that, of course, he met up with great opposition
Yes.
from the upper class people who felt that it was a dangerous thing to educate the poor, to teach them how to think. So he met with terrible opposition, even from the church authorities at that time.
Yes. Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes. And at the moment now, would there be many brothers with you, De La Salle brothers or Christian brothers?
In our region, it's all De La Salle brothers, and
Yes.
it's the Irish Christian brothers are in India, and I think the patricians and perhaps the presentations. We too are in India, but not in the same numbers. But we, of course, we were founded by a Frenchman, and we tended to follow the French wherever they went. And the first French missionaries of Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam were all French, Burma.
Yes.
So it was only natural that the French orders of brothers and sisters would follow the
Yes.
So, what is that? Your question is again?
Well, I was wondering, is there a proportion, maybe a higher proportion now of lay teachers?
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, of course, the number of vocations everywhere is dwindling. We had a strong presence of missionary brothers right up to the 60s, you could say. And they came from all over. It wasn't just Irish brothers. There were also, originally, of course, from France. They were from Germany. They were from Canada. They were from Australia. But after the Second World War, the stronger force was Irish. It was at that time that I went out after my training as a teacher and so on. we manned the schools after the war. They were really destroyed, and we built them up after the war, wherever there was great demand for us. And then we had lots of local vocations. It was always our policy to bring the local people into our way of life. So we had then many local vocations, Chinese, Eurasian, Indians and so on, as we still have, but in declining numbers.
Yes.
So now in where I am, there's only 7 of us scattered in 2 or 3 communities, and still very much involved, though not maybe directly in the school work, through boarding, hostels, even counselling, and of course very much involved in the missionary activity of the church, like the RCIA.
Yes.
You know, I am very much involved in that myself.
Yes. As you probably know, there's a celebration of Mission Alive, a festival of mission, this autumn. And the message coming through is we're celebrating a great missionary activity for 150 years, say, from the 1850s until now. And, you know, many priests and brothers and sisters, and now lay people are carrying on the work. But there's a little kind of hint, you know, that our great missionary activity has come to a halt.
Yeah.
From Ireland. What is your impression of that?
Well, I suppose we have to move on.
Yes.
The local church, I mean, I think that is a general policy, has to cater now for itself. Ireland hasn't got the vocations. It can no longer send out missionaries as in the 50s and 60s. So if the local church want to survive in all these missionary countries, it has to build up and get their own vocations, which they are trying to do. I remember when I went out first, there were some 60 Mill Hill priests, Dutch, Irish and so on, to release. Today there are 2 left. Very often national policy force the church in these missionary countries to put their act together. And I think that is what happened in Salle, where I was. We had a persecution, and one of the local leaders, political parties, of course, they wanted to Islamize the whole state. And they used all kinds of force and intimidation and targeted the Christian churches. So they found that, of course, that the Christian missionaries were quite an obstacle, as we had over the years, 100 or so years that the churches in these places, we had built up an extraordinary, you know, influence and what shall I say, you know, an extraordinary impact on the whole life of the people. Now to promote their political ideologies, they felt that we were an obstacle.
Yes.
So they imprisoned the priests and the nuns, and well, especially the priests, because some of them refused to get out. The people rallied behind them. Anyway, they had their way, of course, but the people then woke up and began to realize, if we want to have our faith, if we want to have our churches and our schools, we must do something about it themselves. And so today the local church in Salle is manned by local people. 2 local bishops, one a tribal bishop. When I say tribal, I mean he's son of the soil, and the other is a Chinese, and the whole church of the region are all, you could say, Malaysianized. So it has forced the church, forced the schools. We brothers also have got out of most of our schools, handed them over to lay people. And we take a back seat. We felt we have built up the schools, and you know that it's our duty to to prepare the ground for, and we have done that, I think, very successfully. And we're very proud of that.
So you are happy, Brother Charles, that you have laid the foundation of the church in that area over the last 100 years, you and your predecessors and your colleagues, and that the native clergy and the native people can carry on now.
That is the situation. I think that is the church is alive and active there. I would say a much more participative church than you have here in Ireland. The youth are very involved, which is very, very good. Churches are packed, and it's a church alive. But as I say, and as you put to me, it's a tribute to the missionaries, and I'm very proud that we Irish have been part and parcel. Not only we Salle brothers of the Christian schools, is our full title, but also the sisters, especially the sisters were well known, I think, here in the south anyway, the Drushan nuns, but they are better known out there as the Sisters of the Infant Jesus. We actually went out there 150 years ago. All French in those days, the brothers and sisters were on the same boat, and we're celebrating that this year throughout Malaysia, especially in Penang and Singapore. So it's a credit to all the missionaries who have worked out there, but it's great, and I'm proud of that I am part of it as an Irishman.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Charles, and we will finish on that note of hope.
Yeah, well, I had an Irishman, a Macrompian, a Carrigan man, a Coshlaura, a Mushra man.
And it is our great privilege to have Brother Charles speaking to us about the missionary work, and with great hope. The Irish missionaries that we are celebrating this year, this autumn, they have laid the foundations in Africa, in Asia, and we're very proud of them.
His brother, of course, and he's the father of your millionaire, Dermot.
Brother Charles, we're very proud of the fact that you and your colleagues and those before you have laid the foundation of the church, and it can carry on now on their own. And that must give you great pleasure as a man from this part of the world. By the way, where did you go to school here?
I went. My national schooling was in Munafluk, and my teachers were Mr. and Mrs. Desmond, who were Macroom people, of course, and it's rather interesting that the curate now of Carriganima, the church where I was baptized and made first communion and confirmed, the curate of that church is none other than Father Batty Desmond, who is the son of my old teachers. So we went to school together. He's probably a year or so older than I am, but I've known him, of course, all my life. So from that then, of course, I joined the brothers. I never came to school in Macroom. In fact, I owe my vocation to his parents, Jerry and Eileen Desmond, because they introduced me to the brothers, and I think I'm the only LaSalle brother from that school.
Well, thank you very much, brother, and again, congratulations on the wonderful work that you and your colleagues have done over the years.